For as rough and tumble as mixed martial arts is, there's still a certain level of decorum that is expected from fans, a certain level of respect, especially after a fight has ended. If someone offers peace, you accept it. You don't bury someone who lost a tough fight. You give winners their proper due. Veterans get a chance to say their piece because it might be the last time we see them. There's quite a bit that can go wrong after a fight if handled improperly, as you'll find out today. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A huge thanks to our channel Hall of Famers for all their support, and these are 10 post-fight snubs that pissed fans off. Number 10, Stephen A. buries Cowboy. Whenever personalities from outside the MMA bubble get involved in the sport, they're in danger of slipping up when it comes to the etiquette that is expected in the space. The greatest example of this has to be Stephen A. Smith following Cowboy Cerrone's loss to Conor McGregor, a massive event in the early days of the ESPN UFC partnership, and so naturally Smith, who was at the time by a considerable margin the biggest on-screen personality at the mothership, worked some pre- and post-show segments with Joe Rogan. Stephen A. is of course best known for his over-the-top takes in the screaming sports debate show format.
Well, duh! Do you see who he's playing with? I can guarantee you most of the audience is gonna agree with me before they agree with you. That's number one.
And he brought that same energy to discussing Cerrone's less than stellar performance.
I didn't expect it to end in 40 seconds, or as you just said, Joe Rogan, the first 15 seconds. It was like shadow fighting, for crying out loud. I'm standing next to a legend, okay? And far be it for me to refute anything that Joe Rogan says, but here's my reality. We haven't learned a damn thing about Conor McGregor based off of this fight, because Cowboy Cerrone just didn't show up. I could have ran for 40 seconds.
I disagree.
But my Lord, you couldn't back up Cowboy Cerrone. You couldn't catch a deep breath. You couldn't circle the octagon just a little bit, get your bearings on you. You couldn't do anything.
My goodness, what an idea. Why didn't I think of that?
Smith's harsh takedown of the beloved star was just not the type of talk we're used to in the MMA space, compared to, say, basketball or football, where these types of discussions of athletes are far more common. Probably has something to do with the fighters beating the shit out of each other and not just throwing a ball into a hoop. But Stephen A. did not bring the proper respect, and so there was a fan firestorm, which bothered the ESPN personality pretty much zero.
Watch this. First of all, someone needs to explain to me what's happening here.
It looks like a dick punch to the left.
This guy should not be allowed to talk about fighting.
Number 9, passing on Loughnane. The format of Dana White's Tuesday Night Titans is really a hell of a hook for an MMA program. Having upcoming hungry fighters compete for a spot in the UFC that Dana himself decides on in the moment at the end of the show is high drama at its best. And while there have been quite a few fighters who have met brutal fates during that final segment, none better represent the worst case scenario than Brendan Loughnane, who would 30-27 Bill Algeo in his fight in season 3 of the show. Now, winning doesn't guarantee a contract, but his victory was more than thorough enough, and Brendan had the credentials to clearly be someone worthy of a step up to the UFC. I mean, they signed Yorgan De Castro literally seconds before they got to deciding on Loughnane, but White could not let go of a pet peeve of his, which is a fighter going for a takedown at the end of the fight, and so he decided not to sign him.
If you get in here and you make it to this show and you want to get into the UFC, show me. Don't double leg when you got 10 seconds left of the fight. When he double legged, I threw my pen and went, you gotta be shitting me.
Algeo, who he defeated, would be signed later on that summer following a win in CFFC, just pouring more salt on the wound. Fans were really upset about this one. It just didn't make any sense. Like, okay, he did a thing you didn't like that one time, but he's clearly talented.
Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. That is so fucking stupid.
Of course, the UFC needs nobody now, though, and so they can pick and choose as they wish. Loughnane would take his talents to the PFL and win $1 million.
Is there anything that you wish you could have done differently?
Yeah, not gone for a takedown.
Number 8, JBJ over Islam. The glazing, as the kids call it, by Dana White of John Jones regarding the pound-for-pound list is now a nearly played-out meme.
Okay, I'm sure this is an interesting story.
It is, because he bit me and he was radioactive.
And I think at some point White became more adamant about it just to anger fans even more. But the first real outburst he had on the topic came unprompted after Islam Makhachev's victory over Dustin Poirier in what turned out to be an awesome fight. Islam had taken the #1 spot following his second victory over Alexander Volkanovski and the news that John Jones would be out for a year due to his torn pec. When asked if Makhachev is one of the best lightweights ever, Dana randomly made things about John Jones being pound for pound #1.
Fight IQ, I'm curious, like, where do you rank him in this pantheon of lightweights that we've seen over the years?
Yeah, I think he's one of the greatest of all time. I don't think he's the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. For anybody to call Islam the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world when John Jones is still fucking fighting, shouldn't be ranking in the pound-for-pound or doing any of the fucking ranking. John Jones has never lost a fight, ever. He's fought all the baddest dudes in the world. And then when you think about what pound-for-pound rankings really mean, he moved it up to heavyweight and destroyed the best guy in the world.
Francis was the best guy in the world, but that's besides the point. The random shift to JBJ in his interview felt like a weird shot at Islam after an awesome win, and things would only escalate from there that summer as Dana would get more unhinged about Jones not being ranked pound for pound number 1.
Numbers don't lie.
Does he have pictures of you?
I saw that on the internet too. Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be.
And in the past 3 years, he's had 1 fight.
And you thought he lost to Reyes.
Who is it right now? Islam? Islam, many people believe, lost to the guy who's a weight class below him.
And when he fought Reyes, you said you thought Reyes won the fight. Or he has fought one time in over 4 years.
He is an active fighter. He just got injured. He was going in.
But he hasn't fought.
And he was going in to fight at heavyweight again. And he fucking destroyed the guy who was the best guy in the division.
Number 7, GSP's stolen belt. This one is just so weird I can't even begin to understand it. There's no doubt that the UFC wasn't particularly happy with George St. Pierre after his controversial title defense against Johnny Hendricks, in part because the decision was highly questionable, and because afterwards one of the biggest stars in the entire sport just up and said he was taking some time off for reasons. At the presser, Dana White wasn't in the best of moods.
Does anybody here think that Johnny Hendricks didn't win the fight? I think the governor needs to step in immediately before these guys destroy this sport like they did boxing. Then I'm scared to come back here and do fights. I'm afraid of this state.
And despite him claiming that St. Pierre would not be attending, the champ would show up in the middle of the thing. There was speculation because of White's claim that he would not be there, that the UFC had attempted to stop him from coming, but I couldn't find anything to substantiate that, and Dana has refuted it. GSP would tell a French-Canadian outlet, though, that while he was showering and getting ready to go to the presser, his belt was taken away from him by UFC staff and never recovered. Now, St. Pierre does arrive at the presser beltless, but a bit later, a UFC title is placed in front of him by UFC staff. What's weirder is that when St. Pierre leaves the press conference, he does not bring that belt along with him. Was that his belt or a prop? Did he just forget it? Regardless, GSP has said that that particular title is no longer in his possession, as back then they used to give you new championships for every victory. So between the bizarre belt stealing and the entire way he was treated after the fight, even though many fans felt he lost, the post-fight nonsense did not go over well. Number 6, Woodley overlooks Wonder Boy. The UFC has a long history of obvious next up title contenders not getting their due by the champion after a fight. Perhaps the most famous being Tito Ortiz shooting down the Chuck Liddell fight in the cage after beating Shamrock.
I don't know, I'm not really thinking about that right now, because me and Chuck, our friendship's not worth the money we're getting paid if you ask me.
But there are others. Some recent gems are Juliana Pena skipping Harrison to call out Nunes when they had Kayla on the split screen, and of course John Jones' lack of interest in Tom Aspinall following his victory over Stipe Miesha. But the only one that was done directly to the face of that contender came to us after Tyron Woodley won the welterweight title in a stunner when he KO'd Robbie Lawler. At that point in time, Stephen Thompson was the clear number 1 contender. Wonder Boy was coming off wins over Rory Mack and Johnny Hendricks while riding a 7-fight streak, so this was a no-brainer.
Johnny just looked at the clock.
Hendricks is done! He put him away! God
my
damn!
God.
Title shot!
You can't fight that guy.
Title shot!
I'm
just saying!
Thompson was working the desk for Fox after the event and got a chance to interview T. Wood and ask him about his title shot. What he got back was some nonsense.
But what are the chances that we get it on in November, my friend?
I think Nick Diaz comes off suspension in 2 days. He's a money fight. I want to make the big dough. So if he wants to fight August with his brother, Nate Diaz, I think me and him can show down at the event.
Look, I entirely understand wanting to get paid and wanting to get money fights. And if the division was dead or lacking contenders or something, I could even maybe justify a big name fight. But Nick Diaz at that point as a title contender was absolutely insane.
How are you? I'm doing all right.
And fans were not at all happy about Woodley's disinterest in the obvious #1 guy. Number 5, Glover abandoned. This one still pisses me off and really doesn't make any sense. Like, Rio crowds have been absolutely awesome at times, especially to beloved Brazilian fighters. Glover Teixeira's unlikely late career title run was one of the most endearing and awesome things that's ever happened in this sport.
I'm a world champion. I'm a world champ.
How can you not love the guy? But given his age and the miles, everybody was aware that the end was near, especially after the absolute war he had with Yuri Pro. Well, Teixeira would find himself in yet another title fight, this time in Rio. His first fight back in Brazil in 8 years, this time against Jamal Hill, who absolutely battered him. It was not pretty and not even remotely close. I guess because of that, as the bout concluded and the post-fight ceremony began to play out, the fans left in droves, just emptying out of the place, while Glover poured his heart out and in his post-fight interview retired from the sport. I cannot imagine as a fan not wanting to hear from a local hero who I'm nearly certain is very close to ending his career, if not so in that exact moment. But you know you gotta beat the traffic. The disrespect was crazy, and while the fans in Rio didn't give a shit, a lot of fans at home were pretty damn salty, including me. Number 4, no goodbye for Stipe. One of the best things the UFC has been doing recently in terms of their production is these video packages for fighters who are retiring. From the most beloved Robbie Lawler to less than a fan favorite Carla Esparza, these send-offs are just fantastic. And any fighter of note who has been around long enough that has decided to say goodbye deserves the brief time it takes on the broadcast to present one, which is why there's absolutely no excuse for the UFC not having such a package ready for Stipe Miesha following his recent bout with John Jones. And while you could argue that he was on the fence about retirement, and so how were they to know, this company produces hype packages for every single fighter on the Contender series and the early prelims. I don't think it would be too difficult or resource intensive to have one ready for a fighter that many, including Dana White, believed was planning to retire after the bout, regardless of the outcome.
And I guarantee you this, if Stipe wins, Stipe's going to retire. You know what I mean? This will be Stipe's last fight.
Some have speculated that perhaps the UFC and Stipe aren't on the best terms. Doesn't matter. We the fans don't give a shit about that. We want the heroes of this sport honored, and they shorted Stipe any way you look at it. Number 3, Griffin ruins Ortiz's retirement. Perhaps there are fates worse than forgetting about your retirement entirely. And look, however you feel about Tito Ortiz, there's absolutely no denying that the man was vitally important to the UFC's success, and he's no doubt a very important figure in the story of the promotion. So when the time came for him to retire, even though it was short-lived, the intention behind it was real, and it would end up being his final time stepping into the octagon. So he deserved to have a moment to address the fans. Unfortunately, that moment was entirely overshadowed and hijacked by one of the weirdest things any fighter has ever done after a fight. Before the decision was read, Forrest Griffin, assuming he'd lost, started hauling ass to the back, prompting Dana White to chase him down and force him to face the music. The display was all the more silly when it turned out that he was the winner.
I said, "Are you out of your mind? What are you doing?" And he said, I was upset and disappointed. I said, "Well, next time you're upset and disappointed about winning, do it in the back."
Instead of leaving well enough alone after that, Griffin decided to conduct Ortiz's final interview afterwards, completely derailing what was meant to be about his final moments in the UFC.
Was that really your last fight in the octagon? Yeah.
Even if you didn't like Tito, the moment was just bizarre, and not at all what fans wanted to see as Ortiz's send-off.
I'm not done talking to Forrest yet. Forrest and I are going to talk some more. You know, what he did tonight is ridiculous. You know, and it's Tito's night. He's retiring. Let whoever's hand be raised, and then stay away from the microphone unless Joe Rogan's interviewing you, okay?
Vision. That was bullshit. Final moments. Come on, dude. You understand, 15 years ago, May 30th, 1997, Joe Rogan was the first person to interview me. And I told him, I'm going to make a mark in this sport. And for Forrest to step in and do what he did after running.
I sincerely apologize. I honestly wasn't thinking. I could see you guys have a ton of history. I apologize. I wish I could take that back, you know. I'm sorry.
Number 2, Dana bails on Ngannou. UFC 270 was one of those events that was backloaded with behind-the-scenes drama far more intriguing than any fight in the cage ever could be, but that you would never know existed just watching the main event heavyweight title bout between Francis Ngannou and Ciryl Gane. That said, even if you were not aware of the deep chasm that had formed between champion Ngannou Ngannou and the UFC by that point over his contract, the most casual of fans would have noticed that Dana White did not put the title around the waist of Ngannou after his victory, but instead matchmaker Mick Maynard. The contract issues were the hot topic going into fight week, and so immediately fans keyed in on White's absence as just another sign of disrespect towards their heavyweight champion. Even more strange, Dana would not appear at the post-fight press conference for the event either. Now, White had not wrapped the title around champions before, most notably when Anderson Silva defeated Damian Maia in a disaster of a fight.
I don't think I've ever been more embarrassed in the 10 years of being in this business.
But fans were with Dana on that one. Here, they were pissed about it. So much so that White would address the issue, claiming that he didn't put the belt on Ngannou and didn't attend the presser because something came up backstage that he needed to attend to.
There was stuff going on backstage that I was dealing with, but for anybody to think that I was showing any type of disrespect toward Francis, I saw Francis all week, you idiots. I shook his hand. I said hi to him.
No more detail was ever given, and while that's the official story, most never bought it and still think the UFC was slighting a champ they were sick of by that point.
Well, it's been a long time that I've been wondering about my future in the company, so nothing has changed. I'm still in the same position.
Number 1, Ronda's cold shoulder. Of all the entries on this list, this small moment had such a massive impact on the way Ronda Rousey was perceived for the rest of her career, which is kinda crazy, but also why it's number 1. One of the great things about sports is that competition can be fierce and there can be bad blood, but oftentimes sharing the court or the field or the cage together creates a level of respect that is often demonstrated after the competition has ended. It's not that they'll be getting Chick-fil-A together or something on the weekends, but some type of mutual understanding of each other is made. I mean, frickin' Colby and Usman did it. It's a beautiful thing, and I can't tell you if I've ever seen it rejected when it's offered, even if only accepted half-heartedly. Well, leave it to Ronda Rousey. Following the end of their heated rivalry, at least in the cage, after their second encounter, Miesha Tate, who had been thoroughly defeated a second time, reached out graciously to shake Ronda's hand in a show of respect, but was met with a cold shoulder.
You said you didn't want to shake her hand because she disrespected your family. What exactly do you mean by that?
My family is my kids on my show. Once you cross that line, I can't shake the hand of someone who spits on my back.
I gave it my best effort, and I'm going to try to walk away as best I can with my head held high.
Over the course of their time together on The Ultimate Fighter, the super cool, super popular Rousey came off like a bit of a jerk, while Tate was able to let her personality shine through and win over some fans. Sympathy shifted a bit going into the fight, and so Ronda blowing off Miesha just rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way, and they carried that energy with them for the rest of her career. A massive thanks to our channel Hall of Famers. You guys are just the best. High fives all around. Fight fans, hit the join button, become a member too, get exclusive content, highly recommended. Like and subscribe, or Stephen A is going to talk shit about you. Leave a comment about which of these moments pissed you off the most, and thank you so much for watching. Let's do this again soon.